Alright, so this actually happened last year, not too long ago. Sometime last year. I think it was sometime in on Halloween night. Now, it wasn't really at night, but it was sometime during the day on Halloween. This actually happened to one of my friends named Miranda, who was happened to be hanging with her friends during high school. Now, since this was the global pandemic, Miranda was with her friends named Tracy, Stacy, and Brittany. They all were talking about what to do for Halloween since they really didn't want to do trick or treating due to the global pandemic. They decided that they would all get together and have just a little party with them, just all three of them and no one else. As they were talking about plans what to do, they decided to go to Brittany's house, which you have to go through the forest path in order to get there. Now, they went through the forest, and as always, it was chilly and it was crispy smell, like fall. It's the middle of fall, so they were walking through the dirt path, and while they were looking up and down, they saw what seemed to be a pumpkin or a jack o' lantern or a carved pumpkin in the middle of the woods. There was one in the middle of the trail. When Miranda examined it, she had no idea who it could be, as nobody was rarely even on the trail that they were on. They went over to one trail that ended up having some weird footprints. They found a few pumpkins already carved in really scary faces, some were silly faces, and etc. They followed they followed that They followed that trail of the pumpkins that were carved, and of course some pieces of pumpkin, when they looked over to see that there was a wide, big open area in the middle of the woods. Now, normally this wasn't really that surprising to see, but they ended up looking to see that there were actually a few people both standing behind some trees in the distance. They looked to be like hooded men, and they seemed to be carrying axes, but none of them carried any firearms. Miranda, along with Stacy, Tracy, and Brittany, had to get out of that area, so they ran back the way they came, and they ended up running all the way back to Miranda's house. They occasionally looked back to make sure nobody was following them, and thank God there was nobody following them. When they got home, they reported the incident about that whatever happened in the woods and about those people. Of course, the authorities did a sweep in there. They only found the pumpkins carved and even pumpkin pieces everywhere, but they didn't find any trace of anyone in the woods. To this day, they're never going into that woods again, especially during Halloween. There are some sick, crazy people out there that like to sit there and actually try to ruin people's lives. If Miranda and her friends stayed any longer, they had no idea what would have happened to them, and what would those men have done to them is still a mystery to this day. So this happened when I was maybe 11 years old. It was Halloween of 2009, and I was going with one of my best friends, which we'll call her Charlie. Charlie was a year older than me, as she was 12 and I was 11 at the time. We decided to go trick or treating together, as our parents were okay with us girls going trick or treating, as long as we followed rules like 1, stay in the neighborhood, and 2, do not eat any candy until we get home, and 3, never go inside anybody's houses. This was a kind of a fear factor when it comes to my mom and dad, as they get paranoid by kidnappers and etc. When Charlotte, or Charlie for short, when Charlie goes over to the door, she ended up saying that she was there. She was dressed up as Snow White, while meanwhile, I was dressed up what seemed to be some sort of wicked witch costume. Me and Charlie decided we would go trick or treating day once it got a little bit darker. We didn't stay too late, but we waited till around maybe 6 o'clock, and then we headed over to do trick or treating in certain houses. There was this one house that Charlie did not really want to go in, and I simply don't understand why she didn't want to go in. But there was this one house that was not far from my street. It was at the end of one other street. Now, at the time, we didn't really know who lived in that house, but that house was somewhat isolated from everyone else. Sure, there were other streets and a few houses beside it, but it was mostly isolated for the most part. When Charlie and I decided to go and check out that house to see if there was any Halloween candy, we walked up to the doors and we knocked on them and waited for a few moments. As we waited, the door opened to reveal that there was a man. He seemed to be maybe in his 40s, and he passed out some candy to us. But upon further inspection, when I looked over the house, I realized that that house that I looked at seemed to have at least 3 or 4 people, mainly men dressed in black. Charlie and I were kind of confused by it, so we backed away from that house after the guy gave us candy and closed the door, and we ended up walking back the way we came. We took a few different routes though, as we were afraid of being followed, as Charlie was paranoid. Once we lost those people, or we think we did, or if they were following, we headed back to our house, and we didn't tell anybody about this incident. But luckily, though, nobody came, but it was pretty freaky seeing a few people inside the house with that man. I thought that they were maybe hanging out on Halloween, but yet again, if we stayed any longer, went inside that house, something freaky would have happened. So, about maybe a few years ago, something really strange happened to my dad on Halloween night. Now, this took place, I think, sometime in 2016, when my dad used to do night shifts as a tow truck driver. Halloween was one of the nights that he had to work on, so it was no big of a difference for him to hear that there was people that needed their cars looked at, like would it be of their keys being locked in, or whatever be a flat tire or etc. Or to big car accidents. My dad was always there. However, he got a call on what seemed to be something going on in a little rural area. It was somewhere in a desolated area, probably around 20 minutes to a half an hour from the place where I was at the time. So my dad drove all the way over there, which was 20 minutes, and helped get this guy's car unlocked as he locked his keys inside. Now, after my dad did this, he was driving home on Halloween when all of a sudden he stopped up to see that there was some wooded area in the path. He looked up to see that there was a girl standing in the middle of the road. My dad first had thought maybe this girl might have been lost or something. So he called out to the girl if she was okay, but there was no response from the girl. The girl didn't even look at my dad. She was just staring at what was ahead of her. My dad pulled over for his tow truck and got out, thinking the girl might have been lost, but then looked around and see that the buildings, or what appeared to be the cabins or something, or what were remains of it, seemed to be deserted and broken. There was some wood that was rotten and even some that were burnt. Some of the trees were even burnt down too, as he saw some ashes. Now, legend has it that there was a girl who used to live in the forest who got caught on fire while during being a Halloween night, and her spirit still lingers. My dad didn't even believe in those at the time, so he ended up looking over at the girl. The girl then took off running down the road, and my dad tried to go chase her, but she somehow disappeared into the trees. The only thing my dad heard was a laugh from the girl. My dad honestly didn't want to stay any longer to find out if this was some trick or this girl was really haunting the place. He got back in the tow truck and turned around, but the figure didn't even bother to go after my dad. My dad got home on Halloween night and didn't tell me about this till sometime when I was going to bed. he told me that that girl that he saw was standing in the woods must have been some sort of paranormal activity. But I still don't know why that girl was there or what the legend of it really was at the time. But my dad and I never but my dad never saw that girl again, and I simply had no idea the, if this was paranormal or something real. We still don't know to this very day, and we're still pretty spooked up about what happened on Halloween night. This happened on Halloween in 2019, and this was shortly before my mom, along with my brother and I, moved to another town. I'm not going to say what town we used to live at, but in other words, it was a pretty popular town, and it was probably one of the most expensive towns to live in. Well, cities, to be exact, if you lived in the city. Now, at the time, I was chilling with my boyfriend at the time, now my ex. Not gonna say his names, but we'll call him T. T was with me at the time, and we were both just chilling and watching a movie. On Halloween night, though, I got about maybe 3 or 4 kids, but then the teenagers came, and eventually I had about a total of 13 people show up at my door. Maybe 14. I waited to see if there was anybody else coming to get candy, but that was just it. I ended up closing the door, but then something really messed up happened. Apparently, someone or something knocked on the door, and I went up to go answer it while my boyfriend was watching TV. Now, since I'm no longer with T anymore, I will have to say that he was busy watching TV when I went up to go answer. The door, it appears to be this one dude. This dude seemed to be dressed up as Pennywise from It. He was a little bit old to trick or treat, and I thought that maybe he had his kid with him, or maybe he was with a bunch of his friends, but I didn't see anybody but him. I handed him some candy, and he thanked me and left. I mean, I didn't see anything wrong with this dude. He seemed to be pretty chilled. But then, however, something really strange began to happen. The next day was probably after Halloween. I went over to my mailbox to check, and I saw that there was a note that said, "You made the right decision." I didn't even know why this note said that, but I didn't even bother to go to the cops about it because I didn't even know if he was still around. I knew it was the same guy with the Pennywise costume. How I knew that the note was written by him was because he made that little drawing of that balloon from It. Eventually, though, while I was home alone, my mom was out doing stuff while my dad was at work and my brother was at school. I eventually got a knock on the door from the cops. The cops ended up asking me if there was this Pennywise dressed up person came to my door last night on Halloween. I said yes, and the police had told me something really messed up that I didn't know. That guy was wanted for sexual assault, as he had been harassing women, mainly around my age and over. Apparently, I ended up showing the police the note, and they took the note and they said that he had been going around different houses in the area. Now, after this shocking incident, I had no idea why this person didn't even try to start anything with me, but eventually I had never seen him again, and I surely hope he got locked up and getting the help that he needs. I still get chills to this Halloween night regarding thinking about this.